In the next trend briefing, we look at a subject called strange days, and there are a lot of very intangible, complex trends that we're going to be examining. But if you cast your minds back 3 years and we looked at the fifth scenario, we predicted a lot of these things that were going to come about. They still are only just entering our mainstream culture or our daily walks past billboards, but increasingly those big mega systems, for instance, the Googles, the Apples, the Waybos and the Facebooks of this world, the Amazons of this world, are surrounding us. They are the gods of our retail and commercial world. So as a brand, how do you feel about engaging with them? Is it a must-have, or is it something that you tick box and say our strategy needs to be on Google? But increasingly, what can they do for you? And it's that sense of how a consumer certainly has grown up with these megasystems, is so used to having these pillars of everyday life. With Google Play now, which is the iTunes killer, and then you obviously have Weibo, which is transforming Chinese culture and Confucianism, and then you have Apple, which is a whole lexicon, and then you have Amazon that sells pretty much anything now. As soon as they start tipping that sort of, I suppose, size and greatness of their mega systems into our everyday lives, whether it's managing our energy consumption or looking after our food bills, we start to rely on them. And increasingly, there are some brands that we've never dropped on our foot. We've never dropped on Amazon, unless it's a heavy box that's been delivered. We've never dropped to Google. We're on our foot. But now increasingly, we can quantify just how important they are in our life. The emotional connection, the resource that these things are. So being gods of commerce, again, we have to think about our entry point into that landscape. So over the coming years, the fifth scenario won't be, should we think about these things? It's a case of when do you think about these things? At what point do you start to engage and use the value of these megasystems? The other part of the next trend briefing is the generation that have grown up with these words, Facebook, Amazon, Google, Apple, etc., being very much part of their dictionary. So we call them Generation I, Generation Intuitive, 7 to 12-year-olds. Those of you with parents, I'm sure, know what it feels like to deal with an intuitive generation that expects fluidity and instant gratification at their fingertips. And whereas we have looked at this subject before with Gen D, who is now in their sort of mid to late teens, Generation Intuitive or Generation I are showing new signs of different behaviours and a real sense of a very organic relationship with technology. And that's going to affect the workplace. So if you're a manager who's starting to think about future recruitment, and you should be, what is your 12-year-old in 10 years going to be like? When they're 22 and they come for a job, when you do your university fair, what's that engagement with a generation that have had supercomputers at their fingertips and in their homes? If you're, again, thinking about the nature of engaging them as consumers, again, how do we start to think about nurturing their mindsets and dealing in a personal information economy whereby they are very data ready and they're saying, here's my data, and we know that through our statistics, the spiking of that acceptance of please have my data is really important to them because of the benefit they get. So as brands, it's important to understand and plan for not just an ageing population of boomers plus, but an ageing population of 7 to 12-year-olds who will be your master consumers in 10 years' time. So the third theme is around re-enlightenment. And if you cast your minds back to 2002 when we looked at the trend of enlightenment, that was where consumers in certainly developing countries or developed countries were becoming enlightened. They were connecting with spiritualism and self-actualization, and then they went through 8 years of enjoying that with champagne. Now we've seen a real connection to the importance of science. So they're now started to interrogate the notion of getting up in the morning and living, the notion of their data, the importance of understanding the ingredients of their life, and that's through a science lens. So re-enlightenment is an interesting shift with regards to the megasystems that are empowering our lives now, and the acceptance of technology as a fluid, essential, emotional thing that we have to have in our lives, to a real interrogation of why we exist and what is the importance of that. And I think it's in many ways a bit of a hangover from what didn't happen in 2012, which was when we had the importance of, again, landing on Mars and thinking about, again, robots starting to interrogate a possible second planet for us, and yet the front pages of newspapers were all about the royal wedding. And it's kind of, again, a reassessment of what actually is important in our lives. So in 2013 and beyond, we're predicting a refocus, a re-enlightenment of there are answers to questions that I have as a consumer. And those questions are bigger, more deeper things about the philosophy of life.